Hey everyone, before we begin today's chapter, I just want to say two things. First of all, thank you so much for the support you've been showing for the Fallen Home series and the Allspark trilogy as well. I had no idea that so many people would actually be interested in that, so it means a lot. Second thing, if you are enjoying the story, I would highly recommend that you check out my other story I'm working on called Journeys Ahead. Journeys Ahead is a whole original thing that I'm making, and I really want to try and turn it into a graphic novel one day as like a new IP or whatever. So if you wish, maybe you could check that out as well, because I really want to get more eyes and feedback on it. This is a big passion project of mine, and it would mean a lot. Anyways, that's enough of me taking your time. Thank you again. Maybe check out Journeys Ahead, and enjoy Fallen Home, Chapter 3. Forgot to say this, but you can find the Journeys Ahead chapter videos in the description. They're free to listen to. Transformers Fallen Home Chapter 3 A Sea of Rust. Pain. Sharp, electrical pain is all that Grimlock felt. His gears ached like a small earthquake, while his servos burned like a barrage of hornet stings. And worst of all, was the ripping sensation behind his spark, his transformation cog. It felt as though to be on fire.
What in Primus's name does Shockwave plan to do with these brutes?
A familiar voice asked aloud that carried its way in the Grimlock's audio receptors. Upon hearing it, the gladiator recognized it instantly with a sickened gut punch. The voice was from that snake of a seeker, the one they called Starscream. Shockwave is merely testing the Allspark's limits, small steps at a time towards our greater goals. Another voice, softer but calculated, more in line of a calm and collective individual with a hint of malice within their spark.
By tearing apart and putting back together the Autobots' front line of defense? What does any of this have to do with transferring Cybertron's essence to other worlds?
Starscream asked the unknown within the room, all the while with Grimlock listening in. Guess you didn't hear me. She's testing the limits. The unknown Khan reinstated with a snippy attitude. She's trying to figure out how much power the Allspark can muster inside a being before transformation. These gladiators are some of the largest and, may I add, accessible assets to us in the moment. The sensation of a hand was then felt upon Grimlock's chest. The cold and sharp feeling of nails began to slowly drag their way down, till stopping at the insignia above his spark. If their changes prove through, Protocol 7-9A will be completed. Who knows what kind of power Megatron could hold over other worlds after that? Grimlock groaned through his empty vision. He tried to open his visor-like eye, but the strain in his spark was still too much to bear. The Autobot was strong, but it felt as though he had been cut apart and stitched back together like some kind of freak experiment.
The last thing I need to hear about right now is Megatron's future rule. Besides, how do we know that the beast won't just tear us apart when Shockwave awakens it?
Starscream questioned with the other Khan, sounding both curious and very concerned. Slowly, Grimlock's visor reactivated, his vision buzzed with static, being accompanied by a sharp alert, exclaiming that he was in no shape to be moving. But, in typical Grimlock fashion, he ignored this. The warrior lifted his head upwards to see where he was exactly. Shapes and forms blurred between the lines of reality and glitched within his vision, but it all soon reformed into a clear view. He was in a lab, a large, compacted research ground with pillars to the ceiling and testing tubes all around. Large cables and power cells jutted from the walls as well as the floor, making everything feel as though it were a freak show. Grimlock then realized that he was chained down by his wrists and ankles. Long, sharp blue electric wires kept the big bot at bay, while other nasty cords and cables were drilled into his body with such force that it looked to have been part of his already existing build. As the two cons continued talking, the annoying beeps of medical devices pricked at Grimlock's audio sensors. It was on par to be like a woodpecker drilling a hole into a tree. That's how stinging the sound was. All his senses felt heightened. Every little thing seemed as though it would set him off. It was hell. Pure hell. Even then, Grimlock couldn't fully remember what happened, or how and why he ended up in this situation. The last thing the big bot recalled was defending his outpost. And then, everything suddenly came back. Shockwave. Flashes of her burned its way into Grimlock's mind, memories of torture and so much agony. Grimlock remembered being fully aware when Shockwave dissected him along with his crew. He remembered watching in horror as she discarded both Sludge and Snarl as they were deemed unfit for further use. Grimlock moaned in pain as he recalled seeing his own limbs on an operating table, his body disassembled like a child's plaything. Yet minus it all, the most key thing he could remember wasn't the sensation of being cut into or being torn apart. No. It was the sounds of his, as well as his team's, constant screaming. Something about that memory, the cries of both Slug and Swoop, teammates that Grimlock saw as siblings, sent a surge of rage through his body. The seams between his panel lines suddenly ignited with a fiery blue glow, with spouts of steam leaving through his vented mouth. It burned viciously. His insides felt like they had suddenly ignited on fire. Grimlock painfully cried with a lunge forward, scaring the daylights out of both Starscream and the unknown female Decepticon that he didn't even recognize. She was both black and red, with wheels for feet and massive wings for shoulders. She had bright red lips that were accompanied with a malicious stare. This Decepticon scowled and then punched the gladiator straight in the jaw. Hunks of saliva and flaming embers spray from Grimlock's mouthplate, leaving him to cough and choke on his own spit. He had never felt so weak, so frail. Yet at the same time, it almost felt as though he could move mountains. "Stay down, you mutt!" the Decepticon barked as she turned back to Starscream, who had both his arms raised, looking to have almost scrapped himself. "And you call yourself one of Megatron's commanders? What a joke." The Decepticon said it in a sly and sassy tone of voice, all ending with a cross in her arms. Starscream's face scrunched in that moment. He looked to almost swear his head off at her. But before he could, they were suddenly cut off by a voice coming through a set of speakers within the lab ceiling. What emanated caused Grimlock's vision to burn violently.
Attention all staff and personnel. This is Shockwave reporting to inform that Protocol 7-9A is a success. After a long week, we finally have results.
Shockwave's cold voice creeped its way into Grimlock's head. The voice that scolded him and his team. The last voice he thought he would ever hear. The voice of a monster.
From our test experiments in the Sea of Rest, we were able to figure out complete TCOG manipulation. Through the Allspark's power and my excellence, Protocol 7-9A is ready and under complete control by our hands. Triptychon is now ours to command.
Triptychon, Grimlock repeated. The Titan? What were the Decepticons planning? The Allspark? Did they have it? What about Optimus and the other Autobots? His team? How long had he been out? Grimlock's mind was going into overdrive. How much time had passed? Was the war lost? Optimus. He had to contact Optimus, he kept saying within.
With Triptychon, we now have a vessel to transport the Allspark's energy to other worlds. We can now enact complete restoration of Cybertron. The great launch will happen in the next 36 hours in Iacon.
Shockwave boasted again with a sense of pride in her voice.
Relish in victory, for we, the Decepticons, have won this war.
And like so, the transmission ended, leaving Grimlock breathing in sharp and spiteful breaths.
Let's just leave. Don't want to anger this thing any more than it already is.
Starscream mumbled as he looked upon Grimlock's twitching, heavy-breathing build. Turning, the two Khans began walking to their right and left through a doorway that opened and closed with a sharp clang, leaving Grimlock alone once again. The Gladiator didn't know how long he had stayed like that, breathing in and out with huffs of smoke and billowing anger. Although his body told him not to move, his mind said otherwise. Find your team. Keep going. Contact Optimus. Break free.
Shockwave.
The mighty Gladiator grumbled. His voice sounded hoarse, deeper, and on fire. The interior of his vocal cords felt as though they were emanating the power of the sun. As a matter of fact, his lower stomach ports felt like there was an ever-burning flame within. Break free, his mind echoed again.
Swoop.
Grimlock groaned as he took hold of the right chain around his wrist.
Slug.
He now took hold of the left chain.
Autobots.
Ignoring the pain in his arms, disregarding the knife-splitting sensation inside his spark, Grimlock began to find his footing and kindled what strength he had left.
I won't.
Grimlock growled, now beginning to pull and tug against his restraints. His joints screamed in agony, his body wailed for him to stop. But he couldn't. Not now. Not at this moment. There was always a time to rest, Grimlock told himself. But now was not that time. Throwing his head upwards, Grimlock looked forward and scowled with a billowing storm igniting his soul. Everything flashed before him. The pain, the rage, the war, and the loss. He couldn't stop now. Not ever. He was Grimlock, the Gladiator of Iacon. And he wasn't about to bow to some scientist. Not now. Not ever.
Me, Grimlock, won't give up!
Grimlock roared with the fury of 1,000 Autobots. Upon this surge of power, the seams across his body ignited into a flaming blue that burned with a surge of energon. Lunging forward and taking hold of his chains, the larger-than-life Autobot yanked with all his strength, breaking away the right cable first, and then the left with a loud crash. Alarms began to immediately blare around Grimlock once he had freed his arms, but this didn't stop him.
Warning, specimen has breached containment.
It cried as Grimlock kicked his feet forward, breaking the chain-like cables that were tying him down.
Must find others.
Grimlock groaned as he stumbled forward, dragging the cabled chains on his wrists behind himself.
Swoop. Slug. I'm coming.
Approaching the lab's entrance door, Grimlock rose his right foot up and kicked with a mighty heave. The large metal entryway, designed to withstand any pressure, exploded off its hinges by Grimlock's sheer force. Sparks and metal plates scattered forward, revealing a large dark purple and gray colored hallway with red alert lights flashing on and off. Gritting his teeth behind the faceplate, Grimlock continued forward, almost stumbling but maintaining balance.
Find them.
He kept telling himself.
There it is! It's escaped!
A Decepticon shouted as he and several others piled into the hallway from the other end. They all held what looked to have been electrical guns and shields of sorts. They were pretty large, but it didn't matter, for Grimlock's mere presence caused even the largest of them to shiver.
Decepticons.
The big bot growled as he continued approaching.
Open fire! Kill it!
One commanded with a shaken voice. All at once, the Decepticons began to fire upon Grimlock in droves. The Gladiator grunted and cursed as the bullets penetrated and bounced off his body. They were small, but it could still be lethal if he didn't do something right away.
Get out of my way!
Grimlock roared as he gripped the two cables around his wrists, finding there to be large chunks of metal and machinery connected to the backs of them. Turning with quick force, Grimlock swung the right cable forward, using the massive chunk of metal at its end as a makeshift wrecking ball. A set of Khans at the front were instantly sideswiped and crushed against the left side wall upon impact. Parts and energon exploded like a firework to the shock and dismay of the other cons in the room.
Scrap! Don't let up!
One of them shouted as they continued to open fire, however, now backing up. Taking hold of the left cable, Grimlock snarled and reenacted the same form of attack. For the hard right turn, the large Autobot used the broken clump of machinery to take out several more Decepticons. Their parts went flying after the impact, leaving those who remained scared and retreating.
Fall back! Fall back!
Another shouted as they began to run back towards the way they came. Grimlock, however, wouldn't allow that to happen. Throwing his arms back, the Gladiator took what was left of the makeshift wrecking balls and brought them behind himself. He then spun his body once, then twice, and on the third round, used all of his strength to disconnect the cables and send the two sets of metal hurling towards the fleeing cons. When the impact came, their mechanical bodies exploded into hundreds of tiny pieces. The hurling chunks of metal then crashed into the following door at the end of the hall, breaking it away and revealing another room full of Decepticons, all looking terrified and out of their minds.
Where is my family?
Grimlock growled towards the cons, and as he did, his backplate transformed and opened to reveal a weapon that ignited into a crimson-blue battle axe. Taking hold of its handle, the large Autobot glared at the speechless enemies within his path, grunted, and then attacked. Forgetting the pain in his legs, Grimlock charged headfirst out of the hall and into the larger control room. The frontline Decepticons didn't even have time to react, for with one harsh slash, Grimlock swung his axe and sliced them in half with a sharp surge of energy. Sparks of blue and white electricity exploded upon the impact, creating a small light show for all to see. The big bot then turned to his right and swung again. Parts and limbs went flying through the air as energon rained down in waves of several colors. Green, blue, and red trickled atop Grimlock's golden red steel form as he went full into his roots, unleashing the Gladiator monster within. Seeing the Autobot approaching, some Decepticons began to open fire upon him, but little to no effect. The bullets either bounced off or did nothing to affect him. Whirling again, Grimlock spun and swung his axe, again slicing apart his enemies while trampling them beneath his heavy feet.
Where are they?
He bellowed while grabbing one by the head, crushing it like a soda can.
Take it out! Full focus on its head!
A Decepticon shrieked as three large, robust cons dropped from the higher floor. They were the same size as Grimlock, however, were dark green, had sharp limbs, and glowing singular yellow eyes. Leapers, Grimlock realized, some of Shockwave's own creations. The three large cons began to circle the warrior, all deploying large claws and daggers to their disposal. However, Grimlock didn't threat, as he rather found himself growing more and more furious. As the three leapers attacked, Grimlock roared and swung, ramming his axe into the abdomen of one, while turning and clocking another right in the eye. The third leaper, however, grabbed Grimlock by his back and began to squeeze, trying to crush his spark with force. Grimlock, however, was much stronger.
Weak!
He shouted as he grabbed the leaper by the head and threw it off his body, completely snapping its neck in the process.
Puny!
He roared as he took the axe out of the other leaper and recoiled it back at its face, destroying it as well.
Waste of metal!
Rushing in from behind came the final leaper, the one whose eye had been punched in. Pulling the axe back out, Grimlock rose its spear-like end and rammed it through the leaper's already damaged optic, skewering it and pinning it against the wall.
Junkyard crap!
The Gladiator bellowed while pulling his axe back, completely taking the leaper's head with its spinal cord still intact.
I won't ask again! Where are they?
South Sector! They're in the South Sector! Please just...
With a heavy stomp, Grimlock crushed the panicking con beneath his foot with a resounding crack.
Thank you!
He growled before scrapping his energon off his heel. Turning, the massive warrior glared with his burning blue visor towards the fleeing cons. Some still stood their ground, while others just transformed and got out of dodge. Retracting his axe by his side, Grimlock rose his left arm and contorted his hand into a fairly large firearm with two barrels jutting out of its sides. Then, with one last huff, he fired a barrage of bullets into the last remaining Decepticons, igniting them into an eruption of parts and fire. As the last in the room fled, Grimlock retracted his blaster and roared with such force it rattled the room itself, signifying victory. As the chaos settled, Grimlock took the time to breathe. South Sector. That's where Slug and Swoop were. There would definitely be more cons coming, so he had to work fast. Taking in the last few seconds of his short break, Grimlock looked down at himself, seeing the stained colors of Energon coating his golden chest piece, until then seeing something new. Where his Autobot insignia had been, there was a Decepticon one layered on top of it. They were gonna fully mind-wipe him, Grimlock realized. Grunting, he took hold of the badge and tore it off his chest, revealing his Autobot insignia beneath. Then, with one fist, crushed the symbol within his palm.
Me, Grimlock. Never, Decepticon.
Grimlock mumbled, noticing that his words were somewhat broken.
Optimus.
He groaned while turning around and heading southbound. As Grimlock walked, his footsteps reverberated through the lab. They were massive, echoing footfalls that would shake the sparks of even the most hardened Cybertronians. Grimlock's memories then flashed, the hall reminding him of the walkways he would take to enter the arena. Oh, how he longed for those days. Days when his name would be cheered on. Grimlock, they would say. Grimlock, Grimlock, Grimlock. Not just him. Swoop, Snarl, Sludge, and Slug. Oh, they were great days. Days when they would be cheered on, and days where they would drink the night away. Days where he, as well as them, were happy. Reaching his hand up, Grimlock clicked the side of his headplate, quickly contacting the leader of the Autobots. Or rather, someone he kinda considered as a close friend.
Optimus, this is Grimlock. Do you copy?
Static rang within Grimlock's head. His spark beat against his chest, and his vision began to slightly blur. He was still so very weak, but he had to keep going. He couldn't give up. Not on his team, nor the Autobots. He couldn't.
Grimlock, is that you? Grimlock!
A voice had never been so relieving to hear. It was Prime. He was still alive.
You're kidding me! He's still alive? I knew it! Grimmy! Glad to hear ya!
Wheeljack then answered.
Optimus. Shockwave. Allspark. She.
Grimlock grumbled and mumbled as he continued along, trying to piece together his words.
Bad things are coming. Grimlock, you sound weak. Collect yourself. What happened? Are you safe? Is your team alright?
Optimus asked, frantic to know what happened to his beastly companion.
Sludge. Snarl. She killed them. We all experimented on. Me escaped, searching for others. Send help, please.
Grimlock fumbled as he kicked down another set of doors, entering a new hall. He felt weak, pleading for help. But the situation, everything, he couldn't let ego get in the way. He knew at this moment, of all times now, that working together is better than fighting alone.
Wheeljack, Windblade, arrange a rescue ship. Grimlock, we are tracking your location now. Can you walk?
Optimus spouted as Grimlock continued on.
Decepticons have Allspark. Using Titan, Tripticon, to eradicate worlds. Launching an Iacon.
Grimlock tried to explain, but his head, he felt so out of it, so distant yet there. His mind was all janked up. Shockwave truly did something, but what?
Tripticon. That doesn't sound good. Grimlock, listen to me. We find that you are within the data mines at the Sea of Rust research facility. You are within the 3rd floor.
Optimus explained.
We have just mapped out your best escape route to your Wayfinder.
Rearing his arm up, Grimlock activated a holographic map that was sent to his internal system. It showed that what Optimus was saying was true. He was about 3 floors up in a large facility surrounded by acid waters. Within it was a red-lined map showing the best route of escape.
Once you gather your team, follow the pathway to that outer shell. There you will be greeted by Wheeljack's rescue team.
Nodding, Grimlock closed the map and continued ahead, slightly groaning and coughing. For the first time, said something that Prime didn't expect.
Thank you.
The gladiator said under his breath as he approached the door.
Stay safe, soldier. They are coming. To all are one.
Grimlock returned before he cut the transmission. With a mighty strike, Grimlock kicked his way through yet another lab door, in the process, crushing a medical con who was guarding the outside.
Out of my way!
Grimlock barked as he entered the room that was similar in shape and design to his own hellscape. This time, however, it wasn't him who was housed, for it was another one of his teammates. Tied upon the ceiling, inside a dangling chamber, was the one Grimlock saw as a little sister, the Autobot aerial fighter named Swoop. She looked tired and beaten. Her arms and legs were strapped and punctured in by electrical cables. These exact cables were sending waves upon waves of green, intoxicating energy through her build that left the flyer almost screaming.
Swoop!
Grimlock roared as he rushed inside, paying no mind to the Decepticons that drew their weapons.
Grimlock!
She shrieked, looking down upon her leader.
Swoop! I'm here!
He called back.
Get me the hell out of this thing!
Grimlock was disgusted. She was once so elegant and playful, but now she looked like a wreck that was in serious pain. Once again, that spark of rage began to billow inside, the literal flaming rage that wanted to claw its way out. Turning his attention downwards towards the Decepticons, Grimlock released a nasty growl before advancing upon them.
What did you do to her?
He bellowed with a violent swing in his axe. The familiar sounds of metal ripping and wires tearing erupted within the room as Grimlock went utterly berserk. It felt as though he were in a blind rage. The cons pleaded, but Grimlock didn't care. They hurt him and his team, and they were gonna pay. Especially Shockwave. Although an Autobot, Grimlock didn't hold back like Prime. He was a destroyer, in and out. No mercy and no remorse. When the red rage faded, all that was left were more bodies and energon in the dust. Grimlock then quickly turned back to Swoop, who dangled in annoyed pain, begging for release. Huffing once more, the gladiator rushed into the center of the medical bay and craned his head upwards towards his sister, as she stared back with distraught eyes.
Swoop! I'm going to catch you! Hold still!
Grimlock yelled as he activated his firearm and took aim at the cable connectors.
Just no shoot me, buddy!
Swoop yelled back, having a similar speech issue akin to Grimlock. Taking careful aim, he set his crosshairs onto the massive crane-like capsule that kept Swoop in place. Settling his sights, the giant bot pulled the trigger, instantly eradicating the power cells and releasing Swoop. Quickly, Grimlock retracted his weapons and rose his arms outward, watching as his sister spiraled downward.
Hang on!
He cried, hoping he would have enough strength to hold her up. Yet before she could enter her brother's arms, Swoop wanted to at least try and transform to avoid possible damage to the both of them. Closing her optics, the flyer took in a deep breath and went to transform into her jet mode. When suddenly, the unexpected happened. Before Grimlock's very visor, he watched as Swoop transformed into something completely different and alien. From her back sprouted a large set of metallic wings that folded and connected to her arms. Swoop's legs then mass shifted and became slender bent joints with talon-like claws. They all snapped together via a flat rustic tail that shifted outwards behind her back. And finally, Swoop's head reverted to her chest cavity and was replaced with a reptilian-looking skull that sprouted with a sharp razor-toothed beak. As the parts settled into place, Swoop didn't blast off. Rather, she flapped her newly designed wings in shock, soared directly upwards, and then began to glide across the room in a slow circle. Looking up and around in complete and utter astonishment, Grimlock couldn't help but feel a loss for words. Swoop had become a beast of sorts, a flying bird-like thing that wasn't native to Cybertron. It was both pretty and oddly disgusting. What in Primus's name did Shockwave do? Grimlock questioned.
Whoa. Grimlock, you seeing this?
The younger gladiator called as she slowly descended, however, landing and crashing into the next door that led out of the lab. In a quick set of clangs, Swoop reverted back into her robot form and stood whirling back to her bigger brother.
Swoop, what was that?
Grimlock asked as he approached with slow steps.
Me? Don't know. But it felt great. Can you do that?
She asked ecstatically while plucking a bullet shell from her arm. Nearing the door, Grimlock took its broken hinges and tore them down. After throwing them aside, he turned and patted Swoop's shoulder, both relieved to see her okay, as well as to move along.
I don't know. Feels strange.
The big guy grumbled as the two began making their way through the hall that had a bright open window casing. Truthfully, it was more or less a long glass bridge that looked over the Sea of Rust. A yellow sunrise cast its way upon the Autobots over a gloomy set of clouds and billowing smoke. If there wasn't a war, it'd probably have been one of the most beautiful sights either of them would have ever seen. But here, and now, it felt anything but enlightening.
Need to find Slug.
Grimlock stated aloud as the rushing waves of metal tearing acid splashed below. Pulling his arm up, Grimlock showed the pathway that Prime had laid out for Swoop. The next massive lab wasn't too far ahead. If they were to keep their pace, they'd find Slug and be out of there in no time.
You've got some nasty teeth on your chest. Oh, and horns on your shoulders. What exactly did she do?
Swoop asked with sheer burning curiosity as they crossed the bridge and entered back into the massive structure.
You don't remember?
Grimlock asked back as the two carried themselves into a large dome-like room.
Not exactly. Mine is fuzzy.
Swoop returned, reaching up and grabbing her head. Grimlock did the same. As he gripped his own, the memories returned once more. The sounds of tools revving and gears twisting and snapping. The painstaking way his mechanical bones were both modified and replaced entirely. Electric shocks and an ever-burning sensation. Grimlock was strong, but even he couldn't shake the chills of Shockwave's methods. Utter horror, even for someone like him.
Good,
he replied to Swoop before taking the lead. The room they had entered was rounded at all corners, or lack thereof. It was merely a large metal dome consisting of hexagons and pillars gleaming with low neon greens and metallic sparking blues. Although subtle, there was one glaring issue the Autobots noticed. It was the fact that it was eerily silent. There were no Decepticons, no gunfire or screams of terror. It was all so...
I must say, consider me impressed, Grimlock.
Suddenly, from out of a pillar in the center of the room, emanated a holographic projection of Shockwave herself. Whirling their bodies, the two Autobots activated their blades, Grimlock with his axe, and Swoop with two spears that emanated a teal green.
You...
Grimlock growled with a guttural bow as his blue visor ignited red with rage.
Where is Slug?
He demanded to know.
He's in a similar predicament as you. A nasty one, he is. Annoying, but impressive.
Shockwave explained as she locked optics with Grimlock.
Slug and Swoop have demonstrated their transformations well. You, however, remain, dare I say, dysfunctional. However, I shall continue to monitor you with great interest. You may resist all you want, but know that escape is illogical.
Shockwave finished with a closing snap upon the hologram.
I'll give you a personal demonstration.
Grimlock snarled with a clench in his fists as the hologram faded.
She's going to pay.
There then suddenly came another sound, one that was familiar yet unexpected. It was the sound of propeller blades. A large ray of light was then cast inside the dome, causing Swoop to turn and look upwards. She then scowled and deployed a mouthplate as her optics met the sight of a new threat approaching, or rather, 2.
Grimlock, we've got company.
She mumbled as Grimlock himself turned to look. Flying in through a now transformed and flashing curved roof came in 2 Cybertronian helicopters. One was a grayish blue, while the other was more of a desert white. Upon their sides were the recognizable insignias of the Decepticon, making the 2 Autobots below continue the burn with fury.
Reinforcements. They're getting bigger.
Grimlock barked as they watched the 2 helicopters drop from the sky and transform before them. Landing to the ground were a pair of massive twins. Their propellers folded upon their backs as a set of large legs and arms appeared with heavy and violent shifts. Their fronts compressed into their chests as 2 prickly-looking heads asserted themselves into the open. The twins' optics beamed with rage as they finished their transformations. 2 of them weren't the most known Decepticons around, but Grimlock and his crew had encountered them once before. The grayish-blue con went by the name Blackout, while the white one went by the name Grindor.
Hello, Grimlock.
Blackout introduced while deploying his weapons.
You and your little runt destroying Decepticon property.
Grindor continued with a scrap-eating grin.
Escape was a bad move.
Blackout added on as the 2 massive Decepticons began to approach, looking to be overconfident and sure of themselves.
Swoop! On me!
Grimlock suddenly shouted, breaking their small talk. Grimlock, upon his feet, then suddenly advanced, as well as the Decepticon duo. The large room then reverberated with the echoes of metal feet clashing against metal ground. Grimlock ran defiantly, with his axe in hand, while his fiery optic-like visor fixed upon the opponents. Swoop, mid-stride, bared her shark-like teeth and leapt forward with a flip, transforming in a quick set of clangs that ended in a primal screech. As she flew, Grimlock gritted his formidable teeth beneath his mouthplate, trying to transform into whatever form Shockwave had forced upon him, but to no avail. Charging behind Swoop, he was determined to escape this place, and most of all, defeat the Decepticons that currently stood in his way. As he lunged forward with a ground-shaking roar, Grimlock brought his axe forward, slashing through the air and towards the Decepticons. Blackout, the towering behemoth with spinning rotor blades protruding from his back, met Grimlock's attack head-on. His massive fist collided with the Autobot's blade, causing sharp sparks to fly in all directions. The 2 giants then engaged in a brutal exchange of blows, each strike resonating through the dome on a ground-shattering level. On the other side of the fight, Swoop dove down from above, her talons extended, aimed directly at Grindor's optics. The smaller Autobot now possessed incredible speed and agility, making her a formidable aerial combatant. Upon impact, she unleashed a barrage of razor-sharp strikes, forcing Grindor to defend himself against the relentless onslaught. Grindor, the hulking Decepticon with immense strength, retaliated with powerful swings of his massive rotor blades that had reverted upon his left hand. He swung them with devastating force, but Swoop's agility allowed her to evade the attacks with ease. With each miss, Swoop taunted her opponent, her snippy attitude only fueling Grindor's frustration.
Ha! You're not so tough!
She cried with a hint of joy. Back on the other side, Grimlock and Blackout's clash intensified. Grimlock's axe struck with precision, aiming for Blackout's vulnerable joints and head plate. The Decepticon, however, relied on his size and brute strength to overpower the Autobot commander. He delivered bone-crushing punches and violent clawed strikes, all attempting to wear Grimlock down. Grimlock, refusing to yield, unleashed a mighty roar that echoed through the dome. His strength surged, allowing him to push back against Blackout's onslaught. With a powerful swing, Grimlock kicked the con back, and then, with a violent slash, disarmed him. Literally. With the blink of an eye, Grimlock had brought his axe back down and sliced Blackout's arm clean off, causing the Decepticon to stagger backwards. Swoop, seeing an opportunity, dove down and raked her talons upon Grindor's face, leaving deep gouges in the Decepticon's armor and completely blinding him. Enraged and screaming, Grindor swung his blade wildly, attempting to strike the elusive Autobot. Swoop, however, continued the dance through the air, taunting Grindor with her witty and downright annoying remarks.
Me, Grimlock, crush you!
Grimlock bellowed as the battle raged on, the clash of metal and the roar of combat filling the domed room. Grimlock fought with unwavering determination, striking with the fury of a true leader, leaving the one-armed Blackout to stumble on his back and howl in pained rage. Looking down at his defeated form, Grimlock snarled before reaching down and taking hold of the severed arm and its blades. Swoop on the other side took one last strike and unleashed a plan for one final devastating strike. At the same time, Grimlock gripped the propeller blades from Blackout's disarmed limb and gripped them tight. Turning back to the scooting away Khan, he charged, belling a roar of fury. At the same time, Swoop soared up and then around before making a turn and diving right for Grindor. In unison, Grimlock rammed Blackout's own blades through the Decepticon's skull, while Swoop, using her wings, completely cut Grindor in two with a cut so clean you couldn't see it upon slice. The room fell silent after that, save for the heavy panting of the victorious Autobots. Grimlock stood over his kill, breathing with smoke and fired ash leaving through his faceplate. It was done. Dropping from above, Swoop transformed and stood side by side with her brother, their optics gleaming with triumph and anger as the Decepticons lay defeated before them.
Well, that was easier than I thought it would be.
Swoop stated in a slightly confused state before she and Grimlock turned southbound once more, following the trail.
Almost too easy. Feel stronger.
As they left the dome, the cold and eerie silence of the wind's howl echoed within the dome, leaving it to be as one in the dust.
Oh, great. Another lab. When will this thing get interesting around here?
Swoop babbled as she and Grimlock made their way into yet another boring, dimly lit room. The same cables and wires connected to the walls, as well as strange medical devices that seemed to never end.
Keep moving. Slug must be near.
Grimlock replied while pushing a set of makeshift tables to the ground, spilling fluid and strange liquid across the floor. The research facility felt like a massive maze. There were no defining pinpoints or even a semblance of care and design. The only difference to be seen were either the room names or sizes, but even then, it all felt so damp and empty.
Wait. Listen. Do you hear that?
Grimlock asked as the sound of muffled cries and blaster fire escaped from an area behind the walls. Swoop approached her brother, tilting her head and listening in as well. It was quiet but audible. There was the noise of firearms exploding, mixed in with the audible sounds of something trampling with heavy footfalls. It then grew louder and louder, until...
Swoop!
Grimlock cried as he deployed an energy shield from his left arm and stood in front of his little sister in a defensive position. At the same time, the back wall of the lab exploded into a flurry of rubble and sparks. Decepticon limbs soared through the air with parts and wires drizzling down alongside them, being accompanied by the low yellow daylight from outside. Getting ready to pull out his axe once more, Grimlock watched as a large shadow began approaching. It was bulky and clunky, with lightning glowing yellow eyes upon its blurred face. Every time it took a step, there was the sound of a heavy stomp that reverberated throughout the room. Swoop at this point had brought her weapons out, now standing beside her brother, both of them ready to fight whatever was approaching. Slowly coming out of the smoke appeared a four-legged mechanical beast. It was large in width, but short in height. The bot even had a massive crested head with a set of horns to top it. The mechanical being's lower jaw had horns as well, but in the shape of makeshift mandibles. The beast was also colored in purple, red, and gold, and to the relief of both Grimlock and Swoop, had an Autobot insignia upon its head. Upon realizing this, they retracted their blades and eyed the beast curiously.
Slug?
Grimlock cautiously asked as the mechanical monster marched forward and bowed its head.
Grimlock? Swoop? I've been searching everywhere for you guys!
Slug answered before reverting into a now modified robot mode.
Slug!
Swoop happily exclaimed as she ran over and gave her other brother a large and tight hug.
Slug, you look awful.
Grimlock returned as he approached the clunky Autobot brute, who rubbed his little sister's head, being thankful that she was okay.
Feels that way. Shockwave really tore me up inside, but I'll survive.
Slug replied with a nod of reassurance towards the larger gladiator.
That makes 3 of us. Listen, there's gonna be a rendezvous point not too far from here. Prime sent some of his scouts to pick us up.
Grimlock quickly explained the Slug, showing off the map route through a hologram. It wasn't too far now, just about a mile and they would be free. Nodding in relief, Slug turned and reverted back into his beast mode, seeing that the way they needed to go was through his current path of destruction.
Good deal. This should be as easy as making beryllium baloney.
Slug exclaimed in a triumph as he charged his way back outside.
You mean cesium salami?
Grimlock retorted as he and Swoop followed their brother.
No! Beryllium baloney!
Slug barked back as they all entered into the sunlight.
Cesium salami!
Grimlock bellowed before they all stopped and looked to their left. Within the smoke and rays of sunlight was the outline of the one and only city of Iacon. It was far off in the distance, but its golden and silver build was visible across the sea of rust. Decepticon flags and propaganda swayed in the wind as the city both burned and bustled with activity. A now striking difference, however, was the towering ship-like shuttle that was donned in grays, greens, oranges, and silvers.
Hey, is that?
Swoop asked as she transformed into her beast mode, gently soaring above both Grimlock and Slug.
Trypticon.
Grimlock growled as they neared the bridge's halfway point.
We must hurry.
Together, the 3 remaining teammates quickened their steps, for the once massive tower form of Trypticon had been slowly converted into some kind of craft of flight. The Allspark's power must have truly been unmatched, Grimlock thought. He didn't know if Prime had a plan, but he, as well as his team, knew they had to get the info back to Optimus. Grimlock's mind, however, still buzzed and ached from the constant temperament of endless experiments. Yet, he still remained focused. Perhaps when they got back to the base, Wheeljack could help them out.
You hear what Shockwave and her pets call us yet?
Slug asked as the trio continued on.
There have been many names, Slug.
Grimlock replied as the cold sea air brushed through them all, sending a wave of shivers to crawl through their spines.
They've been calling us by the name Dinobots.
Slug revealed with an almost confused tone of voice.
These new forms, they're based on some type of alien species called dinosaurs?
What the hell is a dinosaur?
Grimlock questioned as they approached a massive open pad that had several other bridges connected to it.
I have no clue. But me Swoop likes it. Dinobots!
Swoop exclaimed aloud as she did a mid-air flip.
It sounds dumb.
Grimlock grumbled as he pulled out the Wayfinder. Just a few more minutes and they would be home free.
Me don't know, Grim. I'd say we accept these new forms rather than discard them. Me Swoop has never felt so strong.
Swoop again said aloud as she landed, tucking in her wings. Thinking on it, Grimlock didn't verbally say it aloud, but he wouldn't deny that the name did have at least a catchy feel to it. Perhaps one day he would say it aloud.
We'll discuss this later. Just keep moving.
Grimlock barked, leading ahead, when suddenly came the sound of a sharp electrical snap. A sharp flash of blue emanated from behind Grimlock, with it being accompanied by the primal roars from both Swoop and Slug's beast forms. Quickly whirling around, Grimlock's visor widened to the sight of mechanical claws that had transformed themselves out of the platforms he stood upon and lashed themselves around Swoop's and Slug's neck. The claws were large and sharp, expelling heavy amounts of electricity into the 2 Autobots, leaving them vulnerable and unable to move.
No!
Grimlock shouted, but before he could help, another pair of claws appeared from the ground, gripping the gladiator by his hands, feet, and head. The mighty Grimlock then roared in rage as waves of electrical currents rushed its way into his spark, a searing, numbing pain that had begun to drain his life force. With a heavy turn, the claw swung Grimlock back around, the face forward. Before his visor, he watched as the middle sector of the platform began to transform into a pillar-like shape, until at last, the hologram of Shockwave appeared again, with her arms crossed, looking displeased.
You truly think I would build something as powerful as you three and not have a failsafe?
Her voice boomed and echoed across the open cascade. Coming in from the other bridges appeared waves of Decepticons, not medical cons, rather hardened soldiers from the battlefields, all having their sights targeted on the three gladiators.
Forget about before. It matters not. I've come to realize that we have no further use for you and your mutts. You have served your purpose. Thank you for your contributions, Grimlock.
Falling to one knee, Grimlock began to drool and sweat. His torn-apart body began to scream in rage, agony, and a new feeling as well. Hunger. Grimlock didn't know how else to describe it, for he suddenly had the sensation, or rather the desire, to bite and claw like some kind of rabid beast. His spark began to beat at a pace that was unnatural, while his form began to ignite a sapphire blue.
Dismantle them!
One of the Decepticons yelled as some began to open fire. The feeling of sharp bullets penetrating into Grimlock's body caused steam and flames to spurt over Energon. Or rather, it was. Grimlock's interior had gotten so hot that his Energon had almost entirely become sheer gas.
No one!
Grimlock snarled with a guttural growl as he craned his head upwards.
Controls!
Something then snapped. Something ignited across the Autobot. His seams, his visor, even the golden metal of his chest began to ignite with a crimson blue glow. Then, with no issue, tore away at the claws and stumbled forward, scaring the daylights out of all the Decepticons before him.
No one controls Grimlock!
The Autobot commander roared until at last found his strength and through his rage, transformed. Violently lunging forward, Grimlock slammed his fist into the metal platforms, denting and cracking it upon impact. As he screamed with fury, his arms and hands contorted into a pair of large clawed feet and mighty sharp calves. The back of his legs then lifted themselves into the air, spinning in a spiral until contorting into large, sharp forms of a tail. Grimlock's upper chest compressed and snapped around his head while forming a set of tiny arms with 3 knife-like claws on each side. And at last, the top of the body contorted out a large head with horns protruding backwards from the skull. A large muzzle transformed out with sharp teeth contorting forward until at last, with a crimson ignition, 2 beady blue eyes ignited to life. With a Cybertron rattling roar, Grimlock had fully become the embodiment of a king, a beast so strong and so terrifying that it drove the fear through the souls of any that would stand before him. Reacting on his new primal instinct, Grimlock charged forward like a train running at full speed. Some of the platform's electrical systems shut down through Grimlock's mighty stomps, in turn giving both Slug and Swoop the chance to break free from their claws. As they did so, they watched as their leader in his new form began the onslaught. Opening his jaws wide, Grimlock clamped down upon Decepticon, while at the same time swinging his body around, taking out several more with the sheer mass of his tail. Their bodies flew through the air, some exploding upon impact, while others merely went flying to the depths of the acid below. Crunching down, Grimlock split the con within his jaws in half, before hacking its parts out into others below his primordial feet.
Me, Grimlock, has had enough!
The Decepticons below their forms shook with fear, while some fired their weapons, but most ran away. All the while, the holographic form of Shockwave eyed them down, curiously.
Dinobots, destroy!
Grimlock roared as he charged forward, jaws open and roaring.
Oh yeah!
Swoop screeched as she soared ahead, using a set of thrusters upon her back to double the speed. Slug, on the other hand, grunted and neared his horns downward, running at full speed. Charging and leaping through the air, Grimlock landed upon several Decepticons, crushing and biting down upon many while spinning through their forms in a harsh slash with his tail. Once his spin finished, Grimlock threw his head upwards and let go of the cons within his mouth. Their punctured and crushed bodies went up into the sky, allowing Swoop to both slice through them and claw at them with ease. On the other side, Slug thrashed his way through those who were sadly unlucky enough to stand in his path. The mighty horns atop his head penetrated and skewered his enemies with such force they wouldn't even have time to realize what had happened. It was as though the Dinobots were hot knives slicing through butter. There was never a fighting chance, leaving some to wish that they had sided with the Autobots instead. Shockwave, upon seeing the carnage, couldn't help but scratch her chin, curious and interested. Without saying a word, she closed the broadcast, leaving the cons to their doom.
Stay close!
Grimlock commanded as they all continued to plow through the Decepticons in devastating rage.
Rendezvous! Not far from here!
Following behind their older brother, the Dinobots continued their path forward, all the while leaving a wake of destruction in their paths.
Grimlock! Leapers!
Slug then shouted as the familiar sight of large green Decepticons transformed from street poles that were layered alongside the bridge's guardrails. There were 2 in total that dropped down and began to advance at the 3 warriors. But Grimlock was growing heavily sick and tired of this back and forth game of destruction. From within the seams in his body ignited that blue flame once more, but this time it felt to be a building up tension that made sense. The sudden sensation of needing to almost burp filled Grimlock's chest, and as the Leapers approached, the leader of the Dinobots belched in a way that no one had expected him to. Opening his razor-toothed jaws, Grimlock unleashed the fury of a burning blue flame as a mighty heat blast. Like a flamethrower, Grimlock unleashed hell upon the Leapers, instantly melting and disintegrating them with the heat of 1,000 suns. It was both terrifying, yet magnificent. By the time the Leapers had been fried, the 3 of them charged right through their bodies, leaving a rainfall of ash and dust.
We are leaving now!
Grimlock snapped towards the remaining Decepticons that had either transformed and flown away or rolled out, leaving the way open for the mighty Dinobots to cross the bridge and enter their way into the final corridors, all heading for the rendezvous point. The nightmare was almost over. Reverting back into their robot modes, the 3 Dinobots found themselves exiting the research facility through a back door of sorts, confirming that Prime's route was correct. As they left, the 3 found themselves entering a barren mountainside. Dark rocks and metallic stones lined their ways along the facility, being one of the holding points for its sheer mass. There were no signs of technology or Decepticons in sight, for their escape point was upon a small patch on the other side of the mountain. As Grimlock ascended a cliffside, he turned and gripped both Swoop's and Slug's hands, proceeding to pull them up to the next ground level.
Come on. We're almost there.
Grimlock assured, looking into their tired optics. The other 2 Dinobots nodded as they got up alongside their leader. Turning, they began to trek their way forward across the mountain. It was almost done. The light from the sun beamed through the crevices and openings across the mountain, as the constant rain had finally ceased. All that was left was the damp outlook of a sunrise, or sunset. They truthfully couldn't tell. As the 3 marched, Slug carried Swoop over his shoulder. She was beat and tired from expelling her energy, while Grimlock lumbered on, grunting with each footfall that came. They were so tired. Turning into their beast modes really drained their energy. It would take time, but soon they would learn how to control their strength. Somehow. Perking their heads up, the Dinobots turned and looked to their left, as the sound of some animalistic cry echoed faintly across the crevices in the mountain. Another beast? A Decepticon? Grimlock questioned.
Slug, take Swoop and get yourselves to the rendezvous. I'm gonna go check it out.
Grimlock commanded.
But Grimlock!
Slug barked back.
That's an order. I'll be right behind you.
Grimlock stated, before turning and leaning his forehead upon Slug's and then Swoop's tired heads. Their found family bond, unmovable and unbreakable. Stepping back from one another, Slug begrudgingly nodded before turning and making his way to the rescue point, now sprinting and carrying Swoop within his arms. Turning as well, Grimlock deployed his axe and moved in the other direction, following the noise that could easily pose a threat to him and the others. Trudging through stone and dying plants, the gladiator found himself at a crossing point. As he crossed its tight pathway, he found that it led to the site of something that was downright beautiful. Grimlock found himself entering a massive cliff ledge that overlooked the Sea of Rust. The sun shone brightly above the dust and smoke, creating a luminescence across the water that brought a sense of ease over the Dinobot. His shadow was cast across the ground now, while he couldn't help but stare, letting the small moments of peace pass over him. Where did it all go wrong? Grimlock questioned, as a set of memories came once more. Cheerful days, easy days, bright sun, parties, get-togethers, fame, loyalty, all of that. And then how it all passed and crashed and burned. Grimlock recalled how cocky he once was, arrogant and brash, all up until the war, changing from a famous fighter to a commander overnight. It all happened so fast and felt like a lifetime ago. Perhaps when all of this ended, things would go back to normal, is what Grimlock was thinking, until it was all suddenly ripped away. Shooting up from the water like a leviathan came a large driller-like worm. Its mouth was filled with rotating razor-sharp teeth and drooling strands of energon. Startled, Grimlock took a step back and readied his axe, watching as the beast curved its way up and over until facing Grimlock with its mouth. The beast roared and screeched, enraging the Dinobot that felt as though he was about to go toe-to-toe with it.
Driller beast!
Grimlock shouted as he prepared to fight the behemoth. When suddenly, it moved its massive head back and craned itself down. Grimlock then watched as the back of its neck opened with a series of loud clanks and shifts, revealing a glowing red interior of light. Tilting his head, Grimlock grew worried as he wasn't sure to what was about to happen. That was until she appeared. Rising out of the driller's neck, Shockwave arose with her emotionless face. Her beady red eye glared Grimlock down as she found the words to speak to her quote-unquote creation.
You!
Grimlock growled, feeling that burning rage inside. Clasping her hands together, Shockwave examined Grimlock, his stance, emotions, pinpointing everything with her eye from hell.
Both amazed yet disappointed. Something so strong, but still so weak. If only you weren't so quick to temper.
She stated coldly.
Says the one who needed a beast to confront me!
Grimlock retorted, igniting once more.
Step off your steed, Shockwave! Face what you have made!
Shockwave showed no emotion. It was the scariest thing about her. The lack of care or empathy to anyone or anything she touched. It was as though she were more machine than soul. Granted, all Cybertronians were machines. But they were machines with thought, emotions, motives, and goals. Shockwave. She never even seemed real. The best way to describe her was wrong.
You and I both know the outcome of that predicament. I'm merely here to bid farewell.
Shockwave returned in a monotone voice as the lower hatch of the driller opened up.
Really, I should thank you. Because of you, our goals for the future have been realized. So I leave you with a parting gift.
Shockwave elaborated as something within the stomach hatch of the driller began to slowly lumber its way out. Craning his head down, Grimlock watched as a massive form slowly exited through the stomach hatch. The being's gears clicked, and its limbs seemed to pop every time it moved. Squinting, Grimlock focused his visor to see exactly what was moving forward. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Its footfalls made. When it was only then he realized, and almost dropped his axe. Stepping into the light came an amalgamation. Melted metal, uneven welded parts, and several limbs of a being made up of two Cybertronians. Colors of gold, silver and red, and mangled skeletal limbs protruded, with 2 heads forged in the one, all mashed into a massive being that the Grimlock's absolute horror and disbelief was the combined and reanimated beings of both Sludge and Snarl, now a fused monster with glowing red optics and a Decepticon insignia upon their chests. Grimlock slowly shook his head and dropped his axe at his side, looking upon what was once his 2 brothers, now a disgusting creature that looked to be in serious pain.
What did you do?
Grimlock shouted in angered sadness as he turned to look back up at Shockwave.
Goodbye, Grimlock.
She bluntly replied, with no other words, no remarks, no wit, just a simple goodbye. She then returned to the driller, and before Grimlock could shout again, the massive beast returned to the Sea of Rust with Shockwave in it, leaving both Grimlock and the amalgamation of his close friends alone on the barren cliffside. For the first time in his entire existence, the Dinobot felt something that shook him to his spark. It was the feeling of fear and remorse mixed into one.
Grimlock.
The beast said loudly, speaking between the voices of both Sludge and Snarl.
Boys.
Grimlock weakly called back, struggling to raise his axe, unsure if he would even have the strength to do what needed to be done.
Grimlock. Run.
In a set of uncanny struts, the amalgamation of Sludge and Snarl advanced upon Grimlock until leaping in the air and raising what looked to have been a tail for an arm upwards, ready to strike. As the beast landed, Grimlock activated his energy shield, only to be knocked back several feet by the hybrid. The monster's tail-like whip met the defense with a mighty clash, sending Grimlock rolling across the stone and towards the cliff ledge.
Grimlock. Grimlock.
The monster called as it recoiled its tail-like arm upon the ground, like a cowboy testing the bull. Slowly getting back to his feet, Grimlock clenched his fist and eyed down his brothers, the feeling of distraught and raged confusion fueling his spark once more as they charged again. Refusing to raise his axe, Grimlock retracted it back into his arm and instead caught the amalgamation with his hands, locking the two in a push-off. Both their heels dug into the dirt as they grunted and groaned, all the while eyeing each other down.
Boys, snap out of it!
Grimlock pleaded as the empty red eyes of their conjoined faces stared back into his soul.
Grimlock! Grimlock! Failure! 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 Failure!
The monster taunted, trying to spark Grimlock's hatred.
Unthinkable! Unthinkable! Unthinkable!
With a turn, the amalgamation took Grimlock by the shoulders and threw him away from the ledge, leading the Dinobot gladiator to land and roll to his knees, watching as the monstrosity slowly turned to face him again.
I won't fight you!
Grimlock bellowed as the beast snapped its tail downwards again.
Grimlock! Grimlock! We can't control it!
The beast suddenly gasped out with the look of brittle pain behind their optics.
Fight it, boys! Fight it!
Grimlock cried as he prepared for another charge.
Shockwave's control too strong! You, Grimlock, deactivate us!
The duo shrieked as one, their eyes flashing between blue and red. Suddenly turning with a violent snap, the hybrid of Sludge and Snarl practically slammed their head upon the ground as their body began to transform in a broken and disheartening way. Their head had split and compressed into their chest, while their legs snapped backwards with a hefty clang. From out of their lower abdomen coiled outwards a tail with several dagger-like spines. Their arms reached forward, and at their ends became slender claws with 3 digits and posable thumbs. When at last, a long neck attached to a crocodilian-shaped head sprouted, being accompanied by 3 sail-like spines protruding from their back. This beast form looked similar to Grimlock's, but was bigger and vastly more lethal. It was then the beast released a sickening roar, one that made Grimlock realize that there was truly no choice in the matter. he had to fight back. With heavy footfalls, the three-sailed beast charged with his mouth agape and claws out to strike. In return, Grimlock transformed into his beast mode to match theirs and bellowed a powerful roar in return. Charging forward with immense speed, Grimlock relied on his new and powerful hind legs to close the distance between himself and the amalgamation. Opening his jaws open wide, Grimlock attempted to deliver a powerful bite to his brothers, one that wouldn't kill, but rather incapacitate them. However, the agile hybrid swiftly sidestepped the attack, using its long tail for balance and movement. The sailed beast then retaliated by lunging forward with its elongated snout, aiming to impale Grimlock with its sharp teeth. As its slender jaws snapped down, Grimlock managed to evade the attack by swiftly moving his big-horned head to the side, narrowly avoiding the potentially fatal blow.
I won't kill you, brothers!
Grimlock barked as he went for the strike. The Dinobot leader's massive jaws quickly clamped down upon the amalgamation's center sail, causing the predator to roar in pain. However, this didn't falter them, not one bit. With its long claws, the beast slashed at their open sides, creating a sharp set of scratches upon Grimlock's face on the left-hand side. Sparks and energon spewed to the ground as Grimlock let go of his brothers, now stumbling from the sudden attack that caused his eye to twitch. Taking its chance, the hybrid turned and rammed its head against Grimlock's. The two beasts now entered a push-off of sorts, but it was now remarkably more of a struggle. Their toed claws dug into the ground as the beasts attempted to throw each other off. Sludge and Snarl trying to throw Grimlock over the cliff, while he merely wanted to put them at ease and try and fix what they were to bring them home.
I won't give up on you!
Grimlock gasped out as the two rotated themselves around. Sludge and Snarl now facing the cliff and Grimlock back at the mountain face. Releasing each other, Grimlock swung his head and bashed it against the monsters, leading them to both stumble and snap their jaws. The battle continued to intensify as both Dinobots exchanged blow after blow, their roars echoing through the rustic landscape, surely getting the attention of Swoop and Slug. Grimlock's brute strength and ferocity clashed with the combined power of Sludge and Snarl's abilities that were both sharp and cunning. As the two knocked each other back once more, the amalgamation did something that Grimlock quickly recognized. The interior of its build suddenly began to glow with a fiery yellow as steam and smoke erupted from their crevices. Knowing all too well what was about to happen, Grimlock mustered his strength and began to charge up a returning attack. Then, in unison, they fired. From both Grimlock and the amalgamation erupted two sets of flame, yellow and blue. The two charges of fire instantly beam locked against one another, creating a green flame in between. As the two held their beams on, one side began to grow stronger over the other, until vice versa. The two Dinobots were both still new to understanding their abilities, but Grimlock had the upper hand. Mustering all of his strength, the leader of the Dinobots unleashed his flame to its max capacity, in turn leading to the blowback of his combined brothers. As the blue flame struck their crocodilian head, their beast mode flew back and crashed upon its side, skidding towards the cliff's ledge and screeching in sheer agony. Upon seeing his chance, Grimlock huffed and charged his fallen brothers. But before they could get back up, Grimlock reverted back into his bot mode and quickly took them in a chokehold near the ledge.
Boys, stop it! Don't do this!
Grimlock shouted as he kept the massive beast down. Its eyes looked around wildly from left to right. Its legs kicked and body squirmed, all until their eyes suddenly began sparking between red and blue, until at last staying the Autobots' primary color.
Grimlock! We can't hold it back for much longer!
They exclaimed in a wheezing breath.
Brother, you know what you must do.
Shaking his head, Grimlock gripped tighter, but he wasn't sure if he could do what needed to be done.
Me, Grimlock, I can't. I won't lose you both again.
Grimlock shouted, fighting back tears.
Brother, it's okay,
Snarl and Sludge said in unison. Closing his optics, Grimlock, with shaken hands, gripped their head tightly, one hand under the jaw and the other atop the skull.
Never lose faith in yourself,
was the last thing Sludge and Snarl said. It was an old quote, their team quote, the Gladiator's call. Bellowing a scream of rage, Grimlock closed his visor-like optic and as fast as he could, turned their head at an awkward angle. The sound of Sludge and Snarl's mechanical neck snapping was barely audible over the primordial scream and sorrow of Grimlock. He didn't want to look down at them, see what he had done, but he knew now that the struggle had ended. Their thrashing bodies slowly went limp as the audible sounds of rotors and power cells revving ceased altogether. Shaking, Grimlock opened his optics, daring not to look down at what he had done. He had been forced to watch his brothers die once, and now, a second time, by his very two hands. A cold chill ran across the gladiator's body. The once mighty and unstoppable Grimlock now sat, broken, put back together, tested on, and shattered. The war. Everything had taken so much from him, as well as so many others. Grimlock couldn't speak. He couldn't move as he sat there, holding what was left of his two brothers in his arms. His family. Looking up, Grimlock gazed outward over the endless sea of rust, again, feeling the war-torn air caress his face like a pinching finger. It was then, and only then, a small tear trickled down his face.
Grimlock, are you alright? What happened?
The sound of Windblade's voice came from behind.
Grimlock, are you? Oh, Primus,
came Wheeljack's voice as the footfalls of several other Autobots arrived at Grimlock's aid. Grimlock said no words, no remarks, no jokes, nothing. For all he could do was continue staring out over the endless sea, or perhaps the site of an endless war. It was a lot like the sea, Grimlock realized. Like it, war was always changing and moving. They themselves, the Autobots, the Decepticons, they were all the broken metal within the water's depths. And like metal stuck below the waves, it rusts, just as they all have, withering away within a sea of rust.